Welcome into an all-new betting preview for this week's PGA Championship. I'm Rick Gaiman, that right there, Andy Lack. Andy, good to see you. I'm obviously not in the home studio because it is boots on the ground week at the PGA Championship, but
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't been at a golf tournament together in a while. I'm incredibly excited for this one. This is a personal one for me, one I've been looking forward to for quite some time. And I'm incredibly excited for you to get to see this golf course. I'm incredibly
yeah.
excited for the general public to get to see this golf course, both in person, and I think it will play incredibly well on TV. Weather was a big thing that I was a little bit worried about. So still cross our fingers on that, but it's looking pretty good as we stand right now.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. Let's talk about the golf course. You are uniquely qualified to talk about Oak Hill. Oak Hill, they've done a lot of work there in the last couple of years. You and I have been kind of chattering about it for the last week or so to kind of get on the same page. But let's start with the general overview of the type of golfer that should have success around Oak Hill this week.
Well, if you've been listening to other content that I've done in the last 10 days, I apologize for repeating myself. I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but I think it's important to lead off just in case anyone is just watching this video for the first time in terms of their preparation for Oak Hill. The number one thing that you have to lead off with when discussing Oak Hill in the context of 2023 is that throw out 2013 Jason Duffner out the window. This is a completely different golf course. They've removed upwards of 600 trees. The sight lines are different. The angles are different. The greens are completely different. The green sites are completely different. There are new holes. I mean, this was a restoration by the great Andrew Green, who's done phenomenal work, honestly, at a bunch of recent golf courses. He's done a bunch of recent restorations. Oak Hill, Baltusrol, Congressional. This is a guy in the Gil Hanse vein that really knows how to create a modern day championship test while restoring the golf course
Right.
back to the original routing and playing style that Donald Ross had intended. Architects that I'm not as much of a fan of, Robert Trent Jones, Tom Fazio, came into Oak Hill in the 50s, 60s, and 70s and beefed up this golf course a lot to make it more suitable for major championship tests. Oak Hill is a golf course that has hosted a ton of major championships in the past. This is their fourth PGA championship. They've hosted 3 U.S. Opens, a couple of U.S. amateurs, a couple of senior PGA championships and U.S. Opens as well. And Andrew Green was tasked with the challenge of making this golf course a modern test. It's 7,400 yards essentially now, par 70, while still staying true to the integrity of that Donald Ross original design. And we are going to see a much different golf course on television. If you
Right.
watch the 2013 PGA and then look at some of the images already, you're probably already keen to that. It is far less claustrophobic and far more in the vein of previous major championships that we've seen in the Northeast, a la Winged Foot, a la Bethpage, right? These kind of a little bit more wide open with still very narrow fairways and
Right.
thick rough. But as we've seen, like I mentioned, at those 2 previous major championships, Bethpage and Winged Foot, a lot of longer players have been able to have a ton of success on these types of tests.
Yeah, so you mentioned it. I'm glad you mentioned the work that's been done and the idea that you do not even need to consider anything about the previous version of the PGA Championship that we played here. It is so entirely different. You could see that just by looking at the satellite imagery from over the years with all the trees that were removed. So I agree. The idea around, okay, this might play like Winged Foot, this might play like Bethpage Black. The idea that what Brooks Koepka would say is that there's only like 11 guys who can win this golf tournament, right? And I think that a lot of this starts off the tee. If you look at the length of the golf course, if you look at the length of the rough, and you look at the width of the fairways, it's a true test of driving. And the fairways are going to be like 20, 25 yards wide in some spots, or at least in spots where a lot of guys are going to drive it. They are the trees that they left are very strategically placed. They added some of the fairway bunkers are deeper than you would normally see. I mean, if you cannot drive it off the tee, you are in a world of hurt. And the other thing is, Andy, I tweeted this out. I said, you got to be able to drive it. And somebody said, accuracy or distance? And the answer is like, yes, but like both. But distance feels like it would be better than accuracy if we get ourselves a winged foot situation.
I'm choosing distance if you're asking me to choose between whether you'd want a player to be accurate and long. And the reason for that is something that I talk about all the time in terms of the consequence of misses, right? So the consequence of a miss at a golf course like Winged Foot or Torrey Pines, or in my opinion, Oak Hill in this scenario, that misses the fairway by 2 yards versus one that misses the fairway by 25 yards because they have taken out so many trees. There are now angles to these greens from a big miss, right? So what does that actually encourage players to do? What does that play into the hands of? That plays into the hands of players that may not be extremely accurate, especially because a lot of the most accurate players in the field are going to be inevitably missing these fairways anyway, because as you mentioned, they're so small in some parts. But now, if you hit a 330-yard drive that is 15 yards offline, instead of punching out from under the trees and potentially being in a complete dead zone, you might actually have a playing angle to the fairway, not to the green. Not only might you have a playing angle to the green, you might have a 9-iron in your hands instead of somebody that misses the fairway by 2 yards is playing from the same length rough and has a 5-iron in their hands, right? So that is the actual practical reason why this should play more so into the hands of bombers. And I would take a longer hitter any day at this golf course as it stands now over an incredibly accurate one.
I think a lot of energy is going to be spent this week on guys who can drive it well. It's going to suck up a lot of the oxygen. I think it's well warranted. But let's talk about the second shot. The defense around these greens, and I guess it does play into whether you're playing out of the rough or not. Clubhead speed being a priority, but the defense for these greens, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, it looks like a couple of things. There's some very uniquely shaped greens where you can get some pretty interesting pin positions depending on whether it is put, front, middle, and back. Kind of changes the way that you have to attack this. And then a lot of these greens have these bunkers. It seems like every bunker on this golf course is fairly deep and going to present itself with an interesting little challenge. So what are we looking for on that second shot?
Yeah, I think that when most people think and talk about this Oak Hill restoration, the first thing they're going to talk about is the removal of trees. But I think the most impressive work that Andrew Green did was restoring these green sites and these green surfaces to that Donald Ross original back to front sloping greens, with far more pinnable locations close to the edges, far more
Right.
color and character to these greens, far more ridges, right, to these greens. Over time, what happens to golf courses is bunker sand splashes up onto the edges of greens, and that creates a buildup in the grass and the mounding to create these almost punch bowl like greens where everything kind of funnels to the middle. Andrew Green completely flattened off the edges of these greens, making the penalty for misses far more. I mean, if you hit a shot that lands on a corner of a green, that ball is now potentially cascading off the green and into some of these deep and difficult and interesting collection areas, very similar to a lot of what we saw at Southern Hills, where they took out so much rough around the greens and created these very interesting and, in my opinion, far more strategic collection areas surrounding the greens that gives players far more shot options. That, in my opinion, it's far more interesting to watch players hit shots around the green when you have more short grass. Short grass is what we want and should be looking for on golf courses at major championships. So, there's going to be a far more emphasis on the second shot on this golf course. I mean, there are a lot of long par fours. I mapped out the course. I walked the course. There's going to be upwards of 50% of approach shots are going to come from 175 yards. That's more than Southern Hills. That's far more than Oak Hill in 2013. I mean, this is a long golf course, right? And mid to long iron play, particularly long iron play, is going to be incredibly important, as it is at most major championships, but particularly now a golf course like Oak Hill, where no reachable par fives. I mean, a drivable par four that is dead in every direction unless you had a near
Yeah.
perfect shot. I mean, Rick, you look at this golf course and there's maybe one, two holes where you're stepping up on the tee and thinking, okay, this is a real birdie opportunity.
Yeah, this is 14. This is the short par four that is like good luck. Or like where are you leaving this? It's an elevated green. It's there's just you're dead behind it. There's bunkers protecting all of it. So even that isn't necessarily a scoring opportunity in the sense of like a drivable par four on the PGA Tour being a scoring opportunity. So you're right. So when you look at that, we'll kind of put a bow on this. We'll start talking about some names. But what I'm hearing is it's going to be difficult. Winning score. Well, I mean, I think everybody would probably like it 5 or 6 under par, something like that. It'll
I like
depend.
that a lot. The PGA has kind of gotten the formula. They've kind of figured out the formula the last couple of years. And to me, 5 to 8 would be my guess as it stands now.
Yeah. So you're talking about someone who can make par. Par will be a good score often, right? Probably has a more than suitable short game, who hits it far off the tee, who can hit their second shots to the with the correct distance control. That's a very well-rounded golf. This is not going to be a fluky champion. It feels like.
It's a complete test of golf. You mentioned short game, which is the essential thing to mention as well. This is not just a golf course where you can plug driving distance and proximity from 200 yards plus into your model and call it a day. No,
Right.
you need a complete game. The PGA Championship in the past couple of years has moved closer towards a US Open style of setup, right? There's going to be an incredibly low greens and regulation percentage. We talk about Augusta National every year, how short game is so incredibly essential at Augusta National because their long iron approaches and so many players are inevitably going to be missing greens. The greens and regulation percentage at Oak Hill is going to be just as low as it was at the Masters. These greens are 4,500 square feet on average. They're not large greens. And like we mentioned before, so many approach shots from over 175 yards that, yeah, you want to be checking those 3 boxes big time. Like, and that's what, if you look at the strokes gain distribution from championships at Winged Foot in the past, championships like Bethpage in the past, it is a far more emphasis than an average PGA Tour event on approach play off the tee and around the green in many scenarios. And then you get it way lower in putting because it's such a tee to green heavy style of test, right? So, yeah, this is going to be a total and complete test. I can't give players the pass if they're not savvy around the greens here either.
All right, well, let's talk about some names here. This is the grid via Odds Checker, where you can compare the odds across the industry and find the best that are available. And as seemingly we've had, Andy, for the last handful of months, it's really a big 3 here. It's John Rahm at 7.5 to 1, Scotty Scheffler at 8 to 1, and Rory McIlroy 12 to 1. Those are the only 3 golfers sub 20 to 1. All these guys have the tee to green capabilities to get the job done. Is there a click to be made at the top of the board?
Yeah, Rory's going to win this golf tournament. He might win this golf tournament by 5 or 6 strokes. And I'm incredibly excited to do many, many victory laps when this happens. I said that Rory McIlroy was going to win this tournament as soon as the 2022 PGA Championship wrapped up. I said it again in December. I got my first December prediction right with John Rahm winning the Masters. I'm not backing down. There's no reason for me to back down. I understand the criticism of Rory McIlroy's game right now. You look at those most recent results. Wells Fargo did not play well. The Masters did not play well. The Players Championship did not play well. This has not been the start of the season that you were hoping for or expecting for of a player like Rory McIlroy's capability. There have been at least 4 or 5 other instances in his career where he has gone into tournaments before, particularly on golf courses that he didn't, that he loves. I'm talking about, Quail Hollow, for example. He's only done this twice in his entire career where he's lost over 3 strokes in back-to-back starts. It happened all the way on approach. It happened all the way back in 2010 when he was a rookie. What does he do in his next start? He gets his first PGA Tour win at Quail Hollow at a comfy golf course like him. I just think that this is, from a comfortability standpoint, from a value standpoint on the odds board, from a DraftKings standpoint too, in terms of the fact that he would definitely be there's far more skepticism in the industry. I mean, I took thousands of dollars of bets straight up on Brooks beating Rory this week. I took the Rory side, and dozens of people believe that Brooks is going to outplay Rory. So, for me, this is a perfect golf course for him. One of the best long arm players in the world, the best top 3 driver of the ball in the world. Really underrated short game, great bunker player, immaculate bent grass resume, unbelievable on long courses, unbelievable in difficult scoring conditions, unbelievable on long golf courses with narrow fairways, unbelievable on long golf courses with thick rough and narrow fairways and difficult scoring conditions. He's top 3 in everything. Everything. Bethpage, 8th. Aronimick, Donald Ross, Northeast, 5th. Winged Foot, 8th. The list goes on. Southern Hills, 8th. All of these golf courses, he's gaining over 4 or 5 strokes off the tee. I'm not backing down. I feel as good about this one as ever, and I love that people aren't with me on it.
You're not going to hear any arguments from me on Rory McIlroy. Also, if it does, rain week of, it probably only helps Rory McIlroy's chances. So there's probably not anything that can really concern me there. I will say, Scotty Scheffler is the one that I've been staring long and hard.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's comical at this point what he is able to do tee to green. The other thing that and this is very much narrative based, which I try to avoid, Andy, but like I feel like Scotty Scheffler is going to make par from everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
He hits a bad shot occasionally, and when he does, I'm like, this dude's dead. We're finally going to get that bogey. It's finally coming, and he just stuffs every pitch and every chip to 2.5 feet and knocks it in. He is as consistent as they come. His record around major championships has been, I mean, it's the one, obviously green jacket, but he has been piling up top 10 finishes at major championships since the start of 2020. He is as good as he's ever been. I really don't see a scenario in which Jon Rahm, Scotty Scheffler, or Rory McIlroy do not win this golf tournament.
Yeah, there's 4 players in the modern era that are playing in this PGA Championship with minimum 10 starts that have over a 50% top 10 rate in majors, which is pretty comically absurd if you think about it. It's Rory McIlroy over an incredibly large sample size, which is super impressive. Brooks Koepka, Colin Morikawa, and Scotty Scheffler. And Scotty Scheffler's played in 14 major championships. He's top 10 in half of them. I mean, it's just what he has done to start his career at major championships outside of the Masters win. I mean, before Scotty Scheffler even became number 1 in the world, Scotty Scheffler, he was hovering at all of these major championships. Kiowa Island, Harding Park, ton of success already at these PGA championships so early on in his career. I mean, if you want to look at a player that has truly, truly no holes in his game, I would even put him as more well-rounded right now than Rahm, only because Rahm he has some more volatility out of the bunker. I mean, Scotty's short game is so unbelievable what he can do around the green. The only concern that I would mention is his sole victory on bent grass is that Masters win. Every single one of his other victories have been on Bermuda Grace based greens. Again, you are basically essentially with these guys looking for anything you can find to put in the negative category, because you're not going to find many, especially with the top 3.
Yeah, so just to put a capper on Scotty, so here's his major championship history. So he missed the cut at the 2022 PGA Championship. Outside of that, his worst finish dating back to the 2020 PGA Championships. What's that? 10 or 12
Yeah.
major championship starts is a T21. That's his worst
Yeah.
finish. So he's been basically finishing inside the top 20, top 15, top 10 every single start. Okay. Well, there's a pretty big gap, Andy, from those three to everybody else. JT checks in at 20. The love for Brooks Koepka has pushed him to 22-1, along with Patrick Cantlay. Xander hangs at 24 by himself. And then you get Colin Morikawa, Tony Finau, Cam Young, Victor Hovland, Jordan Spieth, all before you get to 30. So that second tier, the non-big three category, is jam full of guys with high expectations, great form, history, like all that fun stuff.
This is a very interesting section of the odds board because I imagine with the doubts surrounding Rory and the price that you have to pay for Scotty Scheffler and Jon Rahm, a lot of bettors are probably going to make 2 or 3 decisions in this range. I mean, the guy that I'm pairing with Rory, I have not made a final decision yet, but I have narrowed it down to Cantlay, Xander, and Finau are actually my 3 guys. And we'll talk about Brooks because Brooks is very popular this week, as I already alluded to, as it relates to Rory McIlroy. But the reason why, and I'll start with Cantlay, you know, there's something about the agronomy of northeastern bent grass that Cantlay feels incredibly, incredibly comfortable at. You know, this is a guy not exactly in the Northeast, but very similar agronomy, very similar type of golf course, Muirfield Village. He's got multiple victories there. The guy wins the BMW Championship in back-to-back years. Those are both classical Northeastern golf courses with the exact same agronomy as Oak Hill and very smooth and fast bent grass greens. The guy puts up the best putting performance in the strokes gained era at Caves Valley on the same type of bent grass greens, right? And then backs it up the next year at Wilmington Country Club, another classical Northeastern bent grass track, wins that one as well. You want to talk about golf courses that require you to make a lot of pars, require you to be patient. What better than a partnership with Joe LaCava, the caddy for the most patient conservative golfer in the history of golf for many years, teaming up with an already patient conservative golfer in Patrick Cantlay. You know, we've seen these bumps with Ted Scott and Scotty Scheffler, with Joe Skovron and Tom Kim. What Patrick Cantlay is doing off the tee as well right now is just, you know, it's the best he's ever driven the ball in his career. And he is, from a statistical standpoint, driving the ball despite not having the distance of a Jon Rahm or a Rory McIlroy or as a Cameron Young. He's gaining just as many strokes off the tee as those guys too. So, you know, the one negative that you're putting in front of Patrick Cantlay's name is the success at major championships hasn't necessarily been there as much as you would hope for. I actually think his major championship record is a little bit underrated. I don't think that he deserves to be in the same conversation for major championships as it relates to players like Max Homa and Sam Burns. He's been way better at majors than Max Homa and Sam Burns. He's finished top 15 in 3 of his last 4. So, you know, I think for me, Cantlay is, man, we'll talk about some of the other guys too, but it is hard for me to cross off Patrick Cantlay from that list.
Yeah, I look at his name and I'm like, yeah, I could see that. You're right. The only negative is like, how much has he contended? But you're right. It is better than some of the other guys that he gets lumped into. The other 2 that you mentioned, I was already like big in on, right? Like Tony Finau and Xander Schauffele. Here's Finau's stat profile, in which, you know, he's got limitless power, right? I mean, he's got limitless power. He has an approach game that
best
is
iron player in the world.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's elite. Like that, I use that word probably too liberally, but it is well warranted here for Tony Finau. And then you look at the short game, which is the worst part of his game, and it's still well above tour average. I mean, and his major championship success, while he has not cashed one in yet, I mean, top 5s, top 10s, all over the place. This should be one of the better setups for him. I'm excited about Tony's chances this week.
Finau has, just to put some credence to what you said about major championships, he's played in 27 of them. He's got 13 top 25s, 10 top 10s, 4 top 5s, and he's done it across the board at all of them. I mean, he's been great at Augusta. He's been contended at US Opens. He's contended at PGA Championships. He's contended at Open Championships as well. There's this thought based on his recent wins that, Finau is getting it done on easier golf courses and easier fields. I mean, if you actually look at his skill set, there is absolutely zero reason to believe that Finau's game is not just as good suited for more difficult tests, major championship style tests that really separate elite tee to green play than it is any of these easier golf courses that he's winning on. By the way, Rocket Mortgage, Donald Ross, Bentgrass, 3M Open, Bentgrass, Liberty National, Bentgrass Northeast. Like, he has done more than enough on these types of golf courses in the Northeast and with this style of agronomy.
You know what's crazy is since he last played a PGA Championship, since last year's PGA Championship, he's won 4 times. So he has
Mhm.
won four. He's played basically one major championship this year's Masters that we just had since these 4 victories. Basically, I guess the Mexico Open came after that, but you know what I'm saying, right? Like since the last time he had a crack at a PGA Championship, he's got 4 more trophies on the mantle, which is absolutely insane to think about because it doesn't. I don't know if I don't know. It feels like he has been better longer, if that makes sense. The other one is Xander. And I'll tell you what, Andy, I'm not a huge Xander guy. It's really hard to argue, especially when you get him in a major championship. The argument obviously being that his well-rounded game, where it is hard to make double bogey with the skill sets that he has, and he has the ability to kind of make par from a lot of different places. It gets incredibly more valuable in these types of situations. The form coming into this is pristine. The runner-up finish at the Wells Fargo Quail Hollow, that's a true test. Some of these elevated events like the 4th place finish at the RBC Heritage, the T10 at the Masters, it's pretty special stuff what Xander's been up to.
This is some of the best golf that he's ever played in his career. He's got 4 or 5 top 10 finishes in a row coming in. He's top 5 in 4 of his last 5 starts. Um, I I don't know. My numbers have him as the second best golfer in this field behind Rory McIlroy as it relates to course fit. I'm not sure that there is a safer bet to finish top 15 this week than Xander Schauffele. Of course, the question that you always have with him is, can he cross the finish line on Sunday? Right. And he continues to put himself in position in these major championships. He is contended on the back 9 of major championships and been right there, right? Whether it be at Augusta, whether it be at Carnoustie. He has felt the heat of the battle in major championships. But as you saw recently at Quail Hollow, there are occasional Sunday struggles, right? That happened with him. His driver was kind of all over the map on Sunday at Quail Hollow, and I don't even know if he played amazing, if it would have been enough to beat Wyndham Clark, but he certainly didn't give himself a chance. So I think for me, Xander Schauffele is going to be incredibly popular in DraftKings. He's an incredibly safe one and
Yeah,
done option if you're
yeah,
like in the money. If you're
yeah.
like in the money, you should feel pretty good about rolling Xander out. I don't know if I'm there in terms of this guy is more likely to win this golf tournament than Cantlay or Finau. I think it's a toss up between those 3. But from a statistical standpoint, I don't know if you are going to find a more weakness free golfer in the PGA Championship field than Xander Schauffele right now, at least by the numbers that I'm looking at.
Yeah, you are foreshadowing the one and done section for later for me because I agree with your sentiment. Here's his last 4 major championships: T10 at the Masters, T15 at the Open Championship, 14th at the U.S. Open, 13th at the PGA Championship. Seems like he will be inside the top 15 again this year. Now, Andy, we're spending a lot of time here on this section of the board because like I think we probably have already spoken about the winner. I think that is likely. I will point out just a couple of other interesting things. Cam Young at 28-1. I love Cam Young. I absolutely get why he would play very well around Oak Hill. But if I have an option to get a 24-1 Xander Schauffele or a 28-1 Cam Young, I'm going to opt for Xander in that scenario. I will bet Victor in the friends and family category because and also he drives it incredibly well. I mean, I do obviously worry about some of the bunkering around these greens that he could get himself into, that he could spew some strokes, but those are going to be two guys that I think will catch a lot of tickets this week.
I think you got to be encouraged by what Viktor Hovland is doing right now in terms of the recent major championship form. This was the question that we were asking of Viktor. The thing that we were wanting of Viktor is, hey, start contending in majors. We don't need you to win one just yet, but start putting yourself in the mix. He has that contending performance at the Open Championship where he's in the final group. I'm not too concerned about his performance on Sunday. I just want the reps, right? And then he backs it up with another top 7 finish at Augusta National. And what was the key to his top 7 finish at Augusta National? And you're not going to say this with a lot of players, where if this guy can just be neutral in a category, he's going to finish in the top 15. It's that around the green play, right? If Viktor Hovland can be neutral, mark my words, if Viktor Hovland, because he's good putter, he's a good putter on bent grass, and you talked about the ball striking, no concerns there. Viktor Hovland can be neutral around the greens at Oak Hill, he will finish top 15. So, this next range, once you get into the high 20s and 30s, I mean, these guys, in my opinion, still can win the PGA Championship, right? Like, I'm not saying even as you go as far down, and we'll get there, as there's some longer shots I actually do like this week. The PGA Championship has been, I guess I'd throw the Open in there if you want to go back 2-3 decades. The PGA Championship has been the major championship that has been more conducive to guys farther down the board, some more surprise winners, your Sean McKeels, your Y.E. Yangs, your Jason Duffners, your Jimmy Walk. Like, there are guys that I'm not willing to cross off. But once you get into this 30 range, just a lot of interesting names that have some red flags, but I'm not shocked if they're holding the trophy on Sunday.
Let's lump a couple of the live guys together here. So we kind of skipped over Brooks. He's 22-1. DJ's 33-1. Cam Smith is 36-1. You get Joaquin Niemann at 66, along with Reed and Taylor Gooch. I think maybe the pendulum has swung too far. I like, obviously, Brooks Koepka at a PGA Championship, but has the pendulum swung too far after a live win, contention deep into the Masters, and now he's 20-1? I mean, I'd almost prefer DJ at 33 or whatever it was.
It's a lot of respect for a guy that has played 2 good competitive rounds of golf in the last 2 years. He looked really great over the first 2-3 days of the Masters. And other than that, he had a win on live on a golf course that, from an agronomy standpoint, from a strategy standpoint, is absolutely nothing like Oak Hill in any sense of the word. Now, if we're just looking at previous PGA Championship form and previous golf courses that Brooks has succeeded at, obviously the guy has won at Bethpage before. He's finished top 5 at Baltusrol before. Bellerive, Shinnecock, those are not very Oak Hill-y in my opinion, but there's no reason to doubt his course fit on this golf course if we're just talking about the Brooks Koepka that we've seen of the last 5 years. I just think it's a lot of damn respect for a guy that we have more uncertainty over his game than every single player priced around him. I mean, we're talking about dozens, 30, 40, 50 really solid statistical performances, rounds of golf that we can point to from every single player on the odds board that is surrounding him. Xander Schauffele, Patrick Cantlay, Rory McIlroy, Jon Rahm, Scotty Scheffler. All of these players have logged 15, 20, top 25 finishes in competitive golf tournaments over the last 2 years. And I understand that Brooks has those major titles in the late, 2018, 2019. He also, every single time that he's been in the mix at a major championship in the last 3 years, has had a fairly dreadful performance on Sunday, whether it be Harding Park, Kiowa Island, or Augusta National. So I just think the respect that he's getting, you termed it well. The pendulum has just swung a little bit too far. This is a 28-1, 30-1 golfer, in my opinion, not a 20-1 golfer at majors right now.
As we get out of that range in the upper 60s, you get the Justin Roses of the world at 80-1, Keegan Bradley, Ricky Fowler. What is the deepest kind of down the board that you'd be willing to fire on in an outright market? Obviously, a lot of these guys are live in the finishing position markets or matchup markets, but like if we're betting outrights, what's the furthest down the board that you would go?
Well, the deepest I would go is watch out for Harris English this week. Okay. You want to talk about Northeastern form? How about a second at TPC Boston? How about a fourth at Winged Foot? We talk about golf courses with similar consequence for missing of fairways off the tee. How about another sneaky top 5 at the US Open at Torrey Pines? You look at that US Open at Torrey Pines and you look at that leaderboard. It's Harris English, it's Brooks Koepka, it's John Rahm, it's Rory McIlroy, it's Bryson DeChambeau. Don't be shocked if you see a leaderboard with very similar names, very similar skill sets at Oak Hill this year from that 2021 US Open at Torrey Pines. So, I mean, this is a guy that it's a dart throw. It's a low-owned option in DraftKings. It's not someone you're rolling out for one and done. He's probably in the, I think I bet him at one.
I see him at 200 in some places.
I think I got him at 160 or something like that. Yeah, there are 200s available. That recent iron play, at the Wells Fargo, he's gaining 7 strokes on approach again. Mm-hmm. So if we're just talking dart throws, Harris English, I think is one of the really, really great options if we're talking long shots, but a little bit more reasonable. I don't think Shane Lowry, Justin Rose, Keegan Bradley, even, I don't think any of those guys are like bad bets. I'm not sticking my nose up at any of those guys. What about for you?
Yeah, I think the Harris English one's pretty interesting, honestly. He was not someone who was particularly on my radar. I think I draw the line at Gary Woodland, 125-1. I will, plug my nose and try not to follow the shot tracker for Gary Woodland because I essentially know the outcome. It's just probably the 11 strokes he's lost with the putter of the course of his last 2 starts. But the ball striking's been immaculate. I think this is going to be, as we've talked about countless times, give me a good driver of the golf ball who can hit his second shots and give himself enough chances. If I can find a -1 putting week, maybe I can find myself in contention and get a little luck of the draw. Guy who's won a major championship. That's probably where I draw the line on this board. But as I talked about, man, I think we're getting a stallion winning this thing. I
agree. I think that it's probably one of the guys that we talked about at the top. I don't think that it's necessarily just the big 3. I think that a Tony Finau, a Xander Schauffele, a Patrick Cantlay, a Victor Hovland, a Colin Morikawa, that tier of players below 40-1, I think are all incredibly live at this tournament. Just a true test of major championship golf. And I'm incredibly excited to see how it plays out.
All right, we're going to continue this conversation, and we've already teased the one and done. I want to dive a little bit deeper into that, but first we are going to take a quick break and hear a word from Andy's podcast.
Andy Lack is one of the nerdiest golf guys that I know, and I mean that as an absolute compliment. His knowledge of course architecture allows him to create some of the most actionable course previews available, and he offers up pure expertise on his own podcast, the Inside Golf Podcast. Twice a week, he offers course breakdowns, DFS, and betting strategy for every PGA Tour event, and he expands the universe by bringing on entertaining and knowledgeable guests who can offer a different viewpoint of the game that we love. Follow Inside Golf Pod on Twitter and download Inside Golf wherever you download podcasts.
Okay, Andy, so for the one and done, I mean, we've already talked about the names. We can talk a little bit about the strategy here. It's obviously a massive purse. I haven't seen what the announced number is, but it'll be 18 to 20 million. It'll be $3+ million to the winner. It'll be something outrageous. So you're probably willing to spend a big boy. I imagine some popular options, if they have not been used, are going to be Victor Hovland. They're going to be Cam Young. They're going to be some of these guys that, with all the conversation around distance and driving ability, I think they're going to be popular. I'm already leaning kind of more towards those well-rounded guys like Finau and Xander, who I'm going to play against you here in just a second. But like, there's also the influx of the live guys, which you have to kind of consider too for the second time this year.
I think Brooks is going to be incredibly popular for one and done because if you look at, I mean, I would be shocked because of the 12 elevated events, 10 elevated events that we've had this year. Probably over 50% of one and done players have used Rory, Rahm, Scheffler, Cantlay, maybe Xander too, maybe Finau. I've used essentially all those guys, Morikawa, Spieth, Cam Young. So, I think Brooks, maybe Dustin, maybe Cam Smith, although there's more questions surrounding them, are going to be incredibly popular one and done options. If you're asking me right now, who has the highest one and done ownership, I'm guessing Brooks, just because I don't think a lot of people used him at Augusta, but I think that the public sentiment on Brooks entering this major championship is very high, just anecdotally.
It's just to kind of put a bow on that, like the value of using a guy who you can only use 4 times a year anyway, right? You don't have to tap into your normal stable of PGA Tour golfers, and getting a guy who, whether he's deserved or not, sub 25 to 1 is very, very appealing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're not going to find any other names that check as many boxes, that present as much upside on the odds board as Brooks Koepka. So, I have my guy. I'm curious how many big names you have left, because I start looking at mine and it's not as sunny skies as I would have hoped for, with 7 more elevated events on the schedule and 3 major championships. But I feel pretty good about my guy, but I'll let you lead us off.
All right. Well, I have used, let's see, I've used Rory, I've used Jon Rahm, I've used Scotty Scheffler, I've used Justin Thomas, I have used Victor Hovland, I have used Cam Young. So that, I mean, we are getting down the list here. One of the guys that I have not used is Xander Schauffele, and I love his chances. I love the safety of it. I love everything. So I'm going to roll out Xander in this spot.
That was who I was going to roll out, because I have Xander left. But in the spirit of chasing, as much as I'm high on Xander's chances this week, I'm not going to take him. I'm going to pivot to a player that I have surprisingly not used, and that's Jon Rahm. So, I was going to use him at a playoff event at the US Open. I'm pretty comfortable now slotting Xander into that LACC spot now, and rolling Jon Rahm out at Oak Hill, which we, surprisingly didn't get a chance to talk about him as much. Maybe it's just because there's fatigue in what is turning out to be a historic season for him. I mean, he is starting to get into Tiger Woods territory in terms of what he's accomplishing from a wins perspective, from a strokes gain perspective this season. So I feel about as good as ever about rolling out Jon Rahm here. And I think if you have him left, I don't think he's going to be more than 6, 7, 8% in bigger contests too.
Yeah, he's likely been already used basically across the board with you watching how many wins and how many great finishes that he's had. So okay, well you've got the favorite in an elevated event, which I don't think that you can go super wrong with when you're chasing, or if you're not chasing in general. So I think you're in a pretty decent spot. All right, I think we've done it. Hat tip to you, Andy. Much appreciated for all the time and energy and the great success this week. I'm looking forward to seeing you out there. You can follow Andy on Twitter at ADPLackSports. You can find me at RickRunGood. This has been your betting preview for this week's PGA Championship. Good luck.